I'm Stephen Mintz, and I want to spend the next few minutes showing you how to bring history to life in online classrooms. I'm a U.S. historian at the University of Texas at Austin, a specialist in the history of families, children, and the life course. I've written a lot about slavery reform, immigration, and film, but my special interest is in the application of new technologies to history education and history research. Digital technologies, I am convinced, have the power to democratize the study of history, to increase access to primary sources and offer exciting new ways to study and present the past. So let me share my screen and let's show you how to bring history to life in online settings using new technologies. We're often so fixated on online learning shortcomings that we slight its unique advantages. These include the ability to make a wealth of primary sources available to our students, permitting all of our students to participate and contribute in class, to monitor student engagement and understanding in real time, and to let students create exciting, multimedia-rich projects. Online teaching certainly cannot replicate every aspect of face-to-face teaching, but it can encourage us to radically reimagine pedagogy. We can focus on skills as well as content. We can emphasize inquiry, myth-busting, and problem-solving. We can uncover the history behind the headlines, the roots of everyday customs and objects, and the distortion of Hollywood's versions of history. We can investigate how do we know. The study of history should not be a spectator sport. Meaningful learning requires active engagement, critical thinking, and thoughtful reflection. In short, the only way to truly learn history is to do history through inquiry, problem-solving, analysis, and interpretation. Now, there are many ways to do this, and here are a few of the ways that I'm not going to talk about today, but that I will share with you in some online documentation. We can annotate texts, we can brainstorm solutions and hypotheses, we can create breakout rooms for our students, we can do concept, human, causal network mapping, we can conduct debates, use a discussion board, geomap data, conduct polls and quizzes, conduct research scavenger hunts, undertake role-playing exercises, undertake surveys of our own students to see how their lives and their parents' lives and their relatives' lives embody history. We can do text and video chat. We can create timelines. All of those are wonderful ways to bring history to life in online settings, but they're for another time. What I want to suggest to you is that teaching online, much more than teaching face-to-face, is a design challenge. Improvisation is far more difficult in an online class than in a face-to-face class. Activities need to be pre-planned, which is why we need to create a pedagogical culture of collaboration and sharing, and I view this talk as a step in that direction. Now, the way to bring history to life is, first and foremost, to introduce students to primary sources. Here you can see an 1859 slave sale advertisement, and look at all the information that's included here that can help students better understand the nature of slavery. First, you might look at the names. Notice how many of the names are African names. This is in 1859. These are clearly names passed down from parents to their children. Then you can look at the various ages of the individuals, their jobs on the plantation, and the price. The occupations are particularly revealing because it underscores the fact that all slaves, all enslaved Africans, were not field hands. Many were engaged in skilled crafts and other occupations. Then look at price. You see that infants and the elderly were valued very lowly, but that women of childbearing age were worth as much as a prime age field hand. Lots of information can be drawn from this that ties into the larger themes involving the history of slavery. Here's a fugitive slave advertisement. All of the runaway slave ads from the 18th century are available online. And here you can find all kinds of interesting information about early enslavement, about whether slaves spoke English or an African language, whether they had any physical scars on their bodies, how they were dressed, whether they received any assistance, whether they were armed, where they were heading. In other words, these very brief ads are filled with valuable information. Architecture is another great historical source, and often in ways that you wouldn't expect. Take a look at the house on the upper right. It's a certain color that we would call red, but it's a certain kind of red. It's a dull, dark red. It's the kind of color that the Puritans would have called sad colors. And of course, those are also the colors of the Ivy League universities today. So Yale's color is a blue-gray. Dartmouth's is a dark green. These various colors tell us that the kind of colors that were valued in the past were very different than our own. Now, artifacts are also revealing. Here you see the coonskin Davy Crockett cap, and this was part of an episode in December 1955 of a new TV show called Disneyland that was introduced to sell the new amusement park. And this cap was one of the first objects sold directly to children, not to their parents. And 10 million Davy Crockett coonskin caps were sold in the first month. And it's interesting to talk to your students about why Walt Disney decided to feature Davy Crockett and how this might tie in with the mentality of the Cold War. Census schedules are wonderful objects for students to work with. It's easy to search through them. They can find, if their families have been in the United States long enough, they can find their own relatives. They can see the composition of families. There is a great deal that you can learn from these objects about occupation, family structure, age relations within households, and the like. It can really be thrilling, I think, for students to encounter their own personal past. Fashion, too, can be an interesting object. You can ask your students, which is the first president to wear pants? Or which is the first president not to wear a wig? These pictures of the Marquis de Lafayette show us a dramatic change that took place in fashion in the late 18th and early 19th centuries as societies became more democratic. The aristocratic dress of the earlier portrait gives way to a very different picture of Lafayette in the early 19th century. Clearly, a cultural shift is taking place. Maps can tell us much more than the growth of geographical information. Here are two geomaps that show us the effect of zoning changes, redlining, changes in school boundaries, and offerings of public services. In the map on the left, you see the location of African Americans in Austin, Texas in 1880. By 1935, when the Federal Housing Administration established various zoning maps, you can see how the Black community was redlined into new areas where they would not be able to receive loans to improve their homes or to buy new ones. Hairstyles can be revealing too. Humans are unique in that we style our hair, and our students are often very interested in styling their own hair. And we might look at these pictures and see what they tell us about the changing attitudes and values of different time periods and historical eras. Historical newspapers and magazines are fantastic sources of information, and many of them are online at the Library of Congress. One 8th grader challenged a professional historian by looking at how frequently the phrase "no Irish need apply" was used in ads. It turns out that it was used quite frequently in ads in the 19th century. Very revealing. Your own students could do similar projects. Maps are not only the growth of geographical knowledge, as I said, but they're also about the construction of political boundaries. Here we can see the changing nature of Texas, how the Mexican state of Coahuila and Tejas gave way to the Republic of Texas, eventually to Texas as annexed by the United States, and then later how Texas took the shape that it has today. What we learn here is that maps are not written in stone, they are political constructions. Movies, of course, provide us with wonderful glimpses into the mood and atmosphere of past eras. Many movies distort our images of the past, but some movies are wonderful historical documents. During World War II, the United States government conducted reviews of films to make sure they aligned with the war effort. And your students might want to look at the government's reading of the film Casablanca, which, as the government saw, was an attack on isolationism and a call for the United States to become more actively involved in the Allied cause. American music is the most popular music in the world, and there's a reason for this. American music has a tremendous capacity to absorb different kinds of music from all over the world. And Irish traditions, English ballads, African songs, all combine to create a new pastiche that has proven to be extraordinarily popular the world over. And further, music in the past wasn't just love songs as it largely is today. Your students can read or listen to political songs, spirituals, work songs, and more, and learn about how past Americans used music to enliven their lives and to express deep feelings. The Social Security Administration has made the top 10,000 names for every year since 1888 available online. Students always find it interesting, I've discovered, to look at how names have changed, how certain names from the past have disappeared and new names have grown more popular. I'm a baby boomer, and baby boomers' names were chosen from a very small subset: Stephen, Joseph, John, Susan, and the like. Diminutives were very popular when I was growing up: Joey, Stevie, Billy, and so forth. And names have changed, and you might discuss with your students why names have changed. Engrams provide a way to look at the frequency and the usage of words in every book that Google has digitized since the 18th century. Here we can see changes in the usage of liberty and freedom. And you might ask your students, why is it that the word freedom has largely supplanted liberty over the past 2 centuries? Paintings are never just reproductions of life as it was or life as it is. Paintings are fascinating sources of information. This is the first known self-portrait in the English colonies. It's of a Puritan, and it's incredibly revealing of Puritan mentality. Notice this is no effort to beautify this man. It's a reflection on death, and in the image next to the man's face, you can see a battle taking place outside. That's, of course, not a real battle. Rather, it is a metaphor for what is occurring inside his own mind. I can think of few objects that better help us to understand Puritan mentality than this painting. But you can use other sources as well. For example, you can use gravestones, which can show shifts in iconography and wording over time, and a changed attitude towards the very meaning of death. Photographs provide indelible images that have the power to raise emotions centuries after they're created. Here you can see a whole assortment of photographs that make time stop, that allow us to have glimpses into the past. And yet we should also recognize that photographs are constructions. That is, photographers convey meaning by the very way they frame and focus their images. The image at the bottom of Migrant Mother was a cropped image of a larger image of this woman inside a tent. It, of course, has become our iconic depiction of the Great Depression. And of course, it echoes many earlier images of Mary and the Christ child and applies it to this country in a much more recent time frame. Propaganda posters are readily available and become another great source for helping us bring the past to life. What is it that the government was trying to convey in these 2 posters? Nothing, I think, can better bring history to life than these objects that embody the past. How about changes in words? Words are invented and shift meaning over time. There's an online etymology dictionary that can allow students to look up words to find out when they were introduced and when their meaning changed, or they can use the Oxford English Dictionary. These provide a clue to how people's thinking has changed, how their societies have changed, how their perceptions of reality have changed, how their values have changed. I don't have time right now to talk about other ways to bring online learning to life, but I want to say briefly that there are new ways that students can demonstrate their knowledge that go far beyond multiple choice exams and far beyond midterms and finals. Have them contribute to a blog. Have them contribute to a collaborative website. Have them create an infographic or a poster. Maybe they can create a podcast or a mini movie, or what we now call a video story, or conduct a virtual store, or contribute to a wiki. Let's let our students be creative. Let's let them speak in the language and modalities of our own time. Let's treat them as creators of knowledge. And I can assure you the very best of these stories are ones that grow out of their own life, out of their own family's experience, a relative who participated in war, either on the battlefield or the home front, or students who were involved in immigration or whose family took part in the civil rights movement. They can create fresh knowledge, not simply retell the past. Now, the future is a blank page. The future has not been written, but the shape of the future of history education is already beginning to take shape. Student-developed apps, simulations, 3D reconstructions of historical sites, virtual reality immersive environments. A friend at UCLA has created a reproduction of the 1893 Columbia Exposition so that you can walk through it, even though it no longer exists. At the University of Texas at Austin, an art exhibit that Jane Austen went to in 1812 was available for us to walk through with virtual reality goggles. Extraordinary experience. Some of my own students developed a simulation of Columbus's voyage to the New World and back using current, wind, and ocean currents. It's a sort of flight simulator of the 1400s. History online can be as exciting and energizing as anything we do in class, but it requires all of us to think of ourselves in a new way, to think of ourselves as learning architects who have the power to design really powerful learning experiences for our students.